3. Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very nice. Welcome to all of you gathered here for our weekly satsang. Welcome also to the many online viewers of these satsangs. Nice to get questions online, and we'll take questions also from our ashram audience. As before, we'll go back and forth between the two groups. We'll start with some questions from online. Online viewer, this is Ganesh, who lives in San Francisco. Ganesh asks, could you talk a little bit about ajatavada? Does it imply that this universe, and by its extension, Ishvara, is illusory? Can I talk a little bit? Can I explain ajatavada briefly? No. Sorry. It's really quite a profound teaching of Advaita Vedanta. It's traced back to Gaudapada, the teacher of Shankara's teacher, in his famous Mandukya Karika, his commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad. He refers to this ajatavada. Let me just make a few comments for Ganesh and for all of you. And that is, ajatavada literally means the doctrine that nothing was ever created. Ajata means not born, but by implication, not created. There never was a universe created. Then what are we what are we doing here? What are we experiencing right now? So this ajatavada is a doctrine taught from the level of non-dual Brahman. For non-dual Brahman, the world is non-existent. For you and me, the world is here. So we have these two perspectives. Gaudapada takes this very lofty perspective and describes his ajatavada in terms of the fact that from Brahman's standpoint, there never was a universe. Like from the standpoint of clay, there's no pot. There never has been a pot, and there never will be a pot. It doesn't make any difference. These are two levels of reality. So from the level of absolute reality, there is no universe whatsoever. Nothing was ever born. And Gaudapada says this in a variety of ways. Notice that we've studied the Mandukya Upanishad here, but you won't regularly hear me using terms like ajatavada. Why? Because these are teachings from the standpoint of Brahman. These are statements that make perfect sense to those who are enlightened. So someone who's enlightened understands what is ajatavada. You get my point? These teachings are not necessarily so helpful for those who are yet to become enlightened. They end up being very philosophical, and for that reason I tend to avoid such topics. Okay. This is a question from Yami, or Yami, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. There's no location here. And Yami asks, since I am Sakshi, a wareful observer, observing a human experience, as is the case for all of us, there are only human beings in this room, there are only human beings watching online. The question then is, why do I still have that feeling of participating and being involved? That feeling that I am not a distant, unattached observer, I am fully engaged with whatever the experience that's taking place here. And this is one of the fundamental issues we confront in Advaita Vedanta, and that is mere conceptual understanding is not enough. So it's not too difficult to understand the concept of Sakshi, a awareful observer. What the word Sakshi refers to is you are a conscious being, the consciousness which reveals the activities of your mind constantly. Means when you're awake, the activities of your mind are revealed. When you're dreaming, the activities of your mind are revealed. And when you're in deep sleep, the absence, we can say, of the activities of your mind are revealed. The darkness, so to speak, in your mind is revealed in deep sleep. As the conscious observer, the very term Sakshi, or conscious observer, suggests distance. There's a distance between observer and observed. And just as the sun, and we use this metaphor, observer is that with the consciousness that illumines the activities in your mind. And once again, I remind you, that's a metaphor. There's no light bulb shining or anything like that. There's no illumination, no true illumination. It's a metaphor we use to understand our experience. The experience is your mental activities are known to you. That's the experience. We can explain it in this way, that your consciousness illumines, as it were, the activities of your mind. And then based on that, that metaphor, sun illumines, and sun is not affected by what it illumines. In the same way, consciousness illumines the activities of your mind, but you feel like you're affected by whatever is happening in your mind. You feel like it. Well, that's evidence of this habitual identification with your mind and body. If you were utterly free from all such identification, if you were absolutely vivid and fixed in your understanding, I am a detached observer, then nothing would affect you. But that's usually not the case. It takes a long time to remove this habitual identification. It takes a long time to shift the language that's, I think, might be helpful. We're shifting our worldview, better yet, shifting our identification. Just as previously we identified ourselves as being identical to our bodies and minds, now the shift of identification is that I am independent of my body and mind. I am pure consciousness, unchanging. It takes time for that identification to shift. Why does it take time? Mind, brain, neurons, mental plasticity. They use all this fancy term. Knowledge takes place in a moment. Understanding takes place in a moment. Shifting identification, shifting our worldview takes time, and takes as much time as it takes. Okay, we'll take one more question here. Praveen. Praveen doesn't say where he lives. Nice if we get the locations. Praveen asks, does the doctrine of karma imply a life that's predetermined, or do we have free will? Well, we've discussed the doctrine of karma on many occasions, and the fact is that the whole doctrine of karma is predicated on free will. That is to say that karma, what we call karma, a deed. What is the word? ISKCON likes this kind of language. This is Swami Prabhupada. He called it a fructificative action. How is that? A fructificative action, which means an action which will yield a result at a future time. That's his language. So what about those actions? Those actions take place only for a deliberate action, a willful action. Anything that's done accidentally is not a willful action and incurs no karma. The metaphor you may have heard me use before, if you accidentally step on a bug, you get no bad, you've killed a living being, but there is no karma associated because there's no free will. On the other hand, if there's a critter crawling along here and you smack that thing, you killed a living being deliberately. And there is a karma associated with that. So the whole doctrine of karma is based on free will. It's not a doctrine of being predetermined, predestination. By the way, I've discussed all this really extensively in a series of videos. Go look up the Doctrine of Karma playlist on my website. You go through those videos. You won't have any. Hopefully it'll answer most of your questions. But yet this idea that the doctrine of karma is a doctrine of predestination is such a deeply rooted wrong concept in Hindu culture. Why? Why do so many Hindus wrongly believe that the doctrine of karma is a doctrine of predestination? And the answer is, for all the historical reasons you may or may not know, in South Asia has been occupied by Muslims for over 1,000 years. And the presence of all those Muslims, this is not critical of anyone, it's just a matter of fact, the presence of Islam in Hindu culture has rubbed off on Hindu culture, which means Islamic ideas rub off on Hindu thinking. Ideas like kismet, a nice Persian origin word, Arabic word, maybe? Actually, I don't know. These words come from two different sources. Some are Arab and some are Persian, and I don't know which is which, but they're definitely not from Sanskrit language. They're definitely not of Sanskrit origin, not part of Hindu culture. So the words used throughout India wrongly applied to the doctrine of karma is words like kismet and nasib, which are either Arab or Persian words. Got nothing to do with Hindu culture. So for this accidental reason, this idea of predestination has gotten mixed up with the doctrine of karma. If you watch those videos on the doctrine of karma, you won't have any further doubt. Okay, shall we take a question here? A question right here. Give him the microphone.
So in the last, the Upadesha Sahasrari, you talked about in deep sleep, there's a darkness, right? Like it's a darkness if there's nothing there. So if you take away all the planets and like the sun and that, and space itself without any objects, is that the same concept or?
So we're making a distinction between darkness and absence. And these are two different ideas, right? You're talking about removing planets. That's an absence. Right. We're talking about the presence of darkness, which is a presence. Okay. So there's two ways of understanding our experience of deep sleep. One way is to call it the absence of mental activities, which is consistent with experience. Another way is to explain it as the presence of darkness, which is equally consistent with our experience. So here we have an interesting situation. We all know what it is to be in deep sleep. There are two ways of explaining it. One way of explaining it is to say that you experienced nothing. The other way of explaining it is to say you experienced darkness. The way we cannot experience it, as many people, the way we cannot describe it, as many people wrongly do, is to say there was no experience. Consciousness turned off in deep sleep. We've discussed this too many times, so we won't go through it. That's not a third option, that consciousness is absent in deep sleep. So two ways. Either you are conscious in deep sleep, but there's nothing to be conscious of, or you are conscious in deep sleep, but you're conscious of darkness. And we use both of these explanations in the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. They're alternative ways of explaining our experience, and they're both helpful in certain contexts. Does that address your question?
Yeah,
okay.
Also, you know how in the last class you said
microphone, please.
Yeah, you said you don't want to go deep into that, but you can ask in Satsang.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wanted to know if like consciousness does remove ignorance, or what was that? I think it was in regards to that.
Okay. In our previous class, we talked about the fact that consciousness, light removes darkness. Consciousness does not remove ignorance. To answer you fully will take about 2 hours. And obviously we can't do that. So I'll give you a very, very brief answer. Remember in a prior satsang we had a discussion that if you are thirsty in a dream, the water on your nightstand doesn't do you a bit of good. For dream thirst, you require dream water. Do you remember that? Okay. Because there are two different levels of reality. So for dream thirst, you require dream water and not real water. Ignorance is like the dream thirst. For ignorance, which belongs to this relative world, this realm of Maya, we'll call it Mayika. By the way, Mayika doesn't mean illusory. Mayika means as real as it seems. This chair is not an illusion. This chair is not absolutely real either. Something in between. So we'll call it Mayika, the nature of that which has the nature of Maya. So for a real ignorance, you would require a real solution. Just like for real thirst, you require real water. For a unreal thirst, like in a dream, for dream thirst, you require dream water. Ignorance is not real. Ignorance is Mayika. For Mayika ignorance which belongs to this level of reality, you require an appropriate solution, which is not consciousness, which is an absolute reality. Consciousness is like the real water. Real water won't help your dream thirst. So for dream thirst, you require dream water. For ignorance, which is in the mind, we require knowledge, which is in the mind. For mental ignorance, we require mental knowledge. Same level. There's much, much, much more we could go through. But have I answered your question in brief? Very good. Another question? Raise your hand behind you, please.
Swamiji, in Vedanta we define aham as ahankara, right, in general?
Well, aham is a pronoun.
Okay.
But we often use that aham, the word aham as a pronoun can refer to different things in different contexts. So with that in mind, please continue.
Okay. So then the Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi,
right,
or Tattvamasi, so when it says Aham or you, what aspect of
your
me
true
is
nature, Satchidananda Atma.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Swamiji.
Okay, so interesting to note that, and something to remember, is that pronouns, aham, I, get different meanings in different contexts, which is a reason for your question. Sometimes aham can refer to ahankara. Better yet, to use the word atma, even, in Sanskrit. Oh, thank you. So the word Atma in Sanskrit, which means the true self, I, but even that doesn't prevent Vyasa and Sri Krishna and all the authors who contributed to the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata, doesn't prevent anyone from using the word Atma to refer to your body, to your mind, to yourself in general. So the point is, every word, every pronoun reveals its proper meaning only in context. We can't take any word. In fact, just yesterday somebody asked me, Swamiji, what does this mean? And whatever, I don't even remember the word he used. But whatever Sanskrit word you use, it means different things in different contexts. So we can only talk about the word, meaning of a word in context. And in the Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, the pronoun aham, or I, refers to your true self. Your question? Go ahead, please.
Oh, I didn't have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then behind. I thought you did. I misunderstood. Sorry. Please.
Swamiji, I've heard karma in at least three different contexts. First, karma kanda in Vedanta. And then you have karma yoga, and then the doctrine of karma.
Mm-hmm.
Are they all different contexts, or they're all the same?
No, they're all different contexts. So we use the word karma in so many contexts, and we have to use the right meaning in those contexts, right?
Right. The follow-up question then is...
And let me just illustrate, and then I'll take you. In Hindi, if you say, Mera karm aisi kharab hai. I don't know if I got the grammar right, but you get the idea. My karma is so terrible. In that expression, you're not even talking about karma in the first place. You're talking about adrishta karma pala. You're not talking about karma. If you look up in the dictionary, the first meaning is action. But here in that expression, you're not even referring to your action. You're referring to the results of an action, and not a recent action. You're referring to the results of a past action, an action that could even have been committed in a prior lifetime. So I'm just showing that to illustrate how widely the meaning of words vary depending on context. So instead of getting hung up on the meaning of an individual word, better to understand the topic, the concept. And you had a follow-on question, please.
So the follow-up question then is, one of these is supposed to prepare us, provide adhikaritvam for jnana kanda. Which one, if one of those is one of these three?
Two of the three. So what is it that prepares us for a life of spiritual growth? You don't have to worry about the microphone. Maybe just put it down so it doesn't make noise. What kind of karma prepares you for a life of spiritual growth? Is that your question? What kind of karma prepares you for a life of spiritual growth? Obviously not papa karma, sinful deeds, because that only creates obstacles to anything you want to accomplish in life, including spiritual growth. But here, even punya karma in and of itself doesn't necessarily help you in spiritual life. So punya karma, for example, going to work to get money to take care of your family, even that in and of itself doesn't necessarily contribute to spiritual growth. It's just very mechanical, whatever you're doing. So in order for karma to contribute to spiritual growth, there are two specific kinds of karma that contribute to spiritual growth. One is prayer and ritual. Karma in the form of worship. So any karma in the form of prayer and worship invokes Ishvara's grace in a specific way that can help remove obstacles blocking your path of spiritual growth. And the other obvious one that you referred to, and by the way, that's karma kanda, prayer and ritual. You made that reference. So karma kanda gives you a lot of rituals which can help you go to heaven if that's your goal. But if you're a mumukshu, your goal is not going to heaven. If you are a spiritual seeker, your goal is not going to heaven. Your goal is reaching moksha. So those same rituals in the karma kanda, which could take you to heaven, those same rituals can be performed for the sake of self-purification, for the sake of invoking Ishvara's grace. It's all a matter of intention. This is a favorite topic. How a karma affects you, how any deed affects you, depends on your intent. So if you're doing a ritual for the sake of going to heaven, it may help you go to heaven, but it's not going to help you gain spiritual growth. So what really determines the nature of a karma is your intent. And that applies, of course, to karma yoga. So karma yoga is a whole shift of motivation. Why do you do what you do? If you do things prayerfully, and karma yoga is a huge topic, we don't want to get into the details, and you know the details of karma yoga already. So karma yoga is a shift of intent in the performance of any worldly deed, so that the goal is not the karma phala, the goal is not the immediate results of the deed, but rather the long-term goal is gaining the preparedness required to reach moksha. So a lot more we could say, but does that answer your questions?
If you don't mind,
Microphone, please.
if you don't mind. So that in the previous discussions we had, we don't need, believe in doctrine of karma for spiritual growth. Where does that fall into this picture?
But as you just said, it need not.
Okay.
Right? I don't know what else to say, but I've commented before that let's make a distinction. This is where the prior this came up in Satsang several weeks ago, and this may be your confusion too. I've said that the doctrine of karma has no spiritual utility. And that may sound like a very shocking statement, but I stand 100% behind that statement. The doctrine of karma has no spiritual utility. But you can pray without believing the doctrine of karma. You can practice karma yoga without believing the doctrine of karma. You can do anything and everything without believing in the doctrine of karma. What's the problem? So a failure to believe in the doctrine of karma doesn't magically reshape your life in any positive or negative ways. It's like if you believe in Jesus, you believe in Allah, you believe in Rama, Krishna, any deity, it's still a belief. The absence of a particular belief doesn't change anything. What changes things is what you do, what your goals are, what your pursuits are, how you live, all of this is consequential. Does that work for you? Okay. Let's take some questions online here. We saw Praveen's question. This is Ritik. I'm not sure, it might have been Ritwik originally, is a Vedic word meaning priest. But Ritik is from Himachal Pradesh. he asks, we just discussed this. If our true self, Atma, is without gender, then for me, being male, is my true self, Atma, also a male in this sharira, or is it still without gender? That's a good question from Ritik, young man in Himachal Pradesh. Consciousness is genderless. Yeah, just leave it on the floor, please. We have this highly gendered way of looking at the world. Everything, bodies are male or female, which leads lots of people to struggle with all this transgender topics. The fact is that world is not just male and female. If you look up in a medical book, you find, I think there are about over 20 intersex conditions. There are 20 physical, I don't know what you would call them, people who are born with certain physical conditions, which can result in more than 20 different intersex conditions. So why are we so fixated, male and female? That's not the way the world works, nature. And then we've got a further problem with language. Fortunately, English doesn't have gendered nouns. Hindi does. Ye kursi hai. So when I refer to this chair, do I say kursi ka or kursi ki? Which is this chair grammatically male in gender or female in gender? I have no idea. I can't keep track. Those of you who grow up speaking Hindi, you know the gender of all these nouns. But for a non-native speaker of Hindi, I have no clue. Why do we gender nouns? It's just human nature. It's like people will refer to their cars as she or he. Or their computers as she or he. We superimpose all these human traits, including gender, on things that are genderless. This chair has no inherent gender. By the way, those for you Hindi speakers, kursi is Strilanga or Punlinga? Hindi has no neuter. I know that much. It's either masculine or like chapati is Strilinga, roti is Punlinga, masculine. Same thing, right? Look at this. Chapati is female, roti is male. Why? Anyway, you get my point. And chair, I'm not sure. It sounds female, but it might not be. I have no idea. Anyway, the point is, consciousness, this is all a big aside, consciousness has no gender. What happens, of course, is we superimpose the maleness associated with this body, we superimpose it on consciousness. Everyone does that. And as a result of that, then you say, I am male, I am female, but that pronoun I, we're back to our context. When you say, I am male, that pronoun I refers to what? Now, it's trickier than that. Suppose if you say I refers to consciousness, we get a problem because consciousness is genderless. If I refers to the body, it's a little tricky because the body is not a conscious being who can have the pronoun I. I is a pronoun that refers to a person. A body is a lump of flesh. So the body has no I, consciousness has no I, then who is it that says, I am male or female? Tricky, right? This is what Vedanta addresses, this problem of identification, consciousness with the superimposed characteristics of the body is male or female. The characteristics of the body are wrongly superimposed on Atma. And that's the issue that Ritik is referring to here. Next question. This is from Shiv, who lives in New York. With Krishna mind, I want to read this exactly because it shows an issue. With Krishna mind, in parentheses, ego and concept free. So what Shiv calls Krishna mind is a mind without ego or concepts. I've never heard that expression. So with Krishna mind, if you look at the reflection of your true self on the clear mind mirror, then look back at the source of the reflection and become Brahman. Please explain that. I don't understand that. And the reason I don't understand that is we've been talking a lot about language today. When language is used in an imprecise way, this is one of a huge obstacle to spiritual growth. We use language not very carefully. For example, Krishna mind. What does that mean? And reflection of your true self in the clear mind mirror. Mirror is a metaphor. So we don't want to mix up a reality of self with a metaphor, which is the mind reflecting. I'm just pointing out problems with the way language is used. And I won't blame Shiv at all, because just from his question, you can tell he's read a lot of books which have used this kind of language. And that's natural. We all seek, and we meaning those of you who would come here or those of you who would watch, we seek spiritual wisdom, and we seek that spiritual wisdom wherever we can, including in books. And some of those books are not very well written. Some modern teachers are not very well educated themselves. So as a result, we become subject to this imprecise language, and frankly speaking, a lot of wrong concepts are disseminated with this imprecise language. We get more confused, and the joke my guru said, this is to mix up Sanskrit and English. There's a Sanskrit grammatical form known as a causative. And in Sanskrit, this won't make sense to most of you, but let me share it with you anyway. He said, Swayam confused, if you yourself are confused, Swayam confused, Paran, others, confusayasi. You cause confusion to others. If you yourself are confused, you inflict your confusion on so many others. And the fact is that the author of many books and a great number of contemporary teachers are just confused, or they make it up as they go along. You know, one of the most famous teachers in India today, I'll leave his name out, claims that he has never studied scripture. So if he's never studied scripture, what is he teaching? You know, whatever he makes up. You know, okay, if it works for him, it may work for him, but then he teaches thousands and thousands of people. And and I don't doubt, for some of them it's helpful, I don't doubt that, but you get my point. So I am confused, Paran confusayasi. If you yourself are confused, you inflict your confusion on others, and I'm afraid Shiv has been the victim of having that kind of confusion inflicted upon him. So, which is why if you're going to read a book, find an author who is himself or herself traditionally trained. And the reason I say traditionally, I don't consider myself an old-fashioned person. I'm quite liberal politically and culturally, and I'm a product of the '60s in American culture, after all. So I don't consider myself very traditional in kind of ethical and cultural elements, but when it comes to learning, I think there's a tendency, people will call it old-fashioned. In fact, in India today, Advaita Vedanta is generally considered to be something quite old-fashioned and out of, not very modern. I don't know what. Anyway, I won't. I won't go on with my bad Hindi, so I'll spare you that. I won't inflict more of that on you. Anyway, the point is that which is traditional has fallen out of fashion today, and I'm not suggesting that you should wear traditional clothing. Who cares? Wear whatever you want. I'm not saying you should eat traditional food, whatever that is. These are tangential, but when it comes to spiritual wisdom, there's something different going on. When we reject tradition in the specific realm of spiritual wisdom, we're rejecting centuries and centuries, generation after generation, of people who gave their lives to understanding and conveying this wisdom. We're throwing out, if we reject traditional spiritual wisdom, we're rejecting something of tremendous value. This is I won't say it's even my opinion, it's my observation. The traditional teachings of Advaita Vedanta, which I have studied intensely for decades, are clearly of tremendous value and convey these truths in a way that modern teachings, if a modern teaching is one that rejects traditional teaching, then modern teachings cannot convey with the same power and clarity what these ancient teachings convey. And a good example, two examples, one I made reference to already, and that is teachers who themselves haven't been traditionally trained. But perhaps a more timely example is, we've discussed in prior satsangs, the problem called Neo-Advaita. Neo-Advaita is a teaching of non-dual teaching. Basically, it's non-dual Vedanta, but chopping off the tradition. It's like chopping down a tree. I'm sorry to be so dramatic, but to me, it's a big deal. To teach Advaita Vedanta, as this Neo-Advaita tradition does, while at the same time ignoring generations and generations of powerful teachers, going back to Shankara and before, all ignored. There's something lost. Not something, a lot gets lost. So there, for Shiv, you've asked me to explain something that I can't explain because it's a product of some jumbled thought. So just a warning for all, and that is to be interesting. You're careful about what you eat most of the time. Not all the time, most of the time. You're careful about what you consume. when you read a book or listen to a teacher, that's another kind of consumption. Shouldn't you be careful about what you consume? If you eat the wrong foods, there are going to be consequences. If you consume, metaphorically, the wrong kind of spiritual teachings, there will be consequences. Another question. Jayant, who lives in Raipur. Can you explain what is meant by the word svarupa of Atma? Svarupa means true nature. And why is Atma called Sat Chit Ananda Svarupa? In fact, this came up in our earlier class, our Upadesha Sahasri class. What our Satsangis haven't heard this, so let me just say very briefly. Sat, Chit, and Ananda are not adjectives that describe what is the nature of Atma. So we tend to describe things by adjectives. This cloth is orange. This cloth is red. So orange and red are two adjectives. The thing about an adjective is something can change. You can have cloth that is not orange or red. You can have green cloth, brown cloth, white cloth. Adjectives are changeable, variable, inconsistent. So if Sat, Chit, and Ananda are adjectives, it means you could have a different kind of Atma. An Atma that is not Sat, that is not pure existence. An Atma that is not Chit, not consciousness. An Atma that is not Ananda, limitless, full, complete. So the point I'm making that these three words are not adjectives. What are they? Well, Jayant used the right word, svarupa, and in Sanskrit they're called more technically svarupa lakshana. Lakshana is a word that indicates. So these are three words that indicate not what kind of Atma, like what kind of cloth, orange cloth or red cloth, they indicate the svarupa, the true nature of Atma. So Sat, Chit, Ananda are not descriptive words. They rather indicate the essence of what Atma is, Sat, Chit, Ananda. One more question here. This one. This is from Lindsay, who lives in Denver. And I think it's a she. She says, I have some days of being in great peace and bliss, but then those days are followed by falling back into ignorance and suffering. I end up feeling very discouraged, overwhelmed. What is your advice? Back to the problem of identification. Our minds are subject to ups and downs. Ups and downs that you have no direct control over. You have some indirect control over your ups and downs. I drink coffee every morning, and that's some little bit of control to kind of get things up a little bit. Seeking pleasant experiences, avoiding unpleasant experiences is an indirect means of being up and not down. Why do I say indirect? In fact, I should correct myself. I would call coffee more of a direct means. Why would I call coffee a direct means to getting up your mind, to getting up? Coffee is a direct means, whereas doing something pleasant is an indirect means. You follow my distinction here? This is something I've never used this language before. See if it works for you. Coffee is a direct means because caffeine directly affects the way our brains work. It's a stimulant. It directly acts on your brain. And the amount of coffee you have, fortunately, is something you can adjust. You can drink more, you can drink less, you can not drink anything at all. So this is one way of affecting your mood, if we call it that. But your mood, and this is such an important topic, your mood. No one likes to be in a bad mood. Everyone wants to be in a good mood 24/7, whenever you're awake, right? No one wants to be in a bad mood. We all want to be in a good mood. And we find that sometimes coffee doesn't work. We find that sometimes being in pleasant situations sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. What can you do to directly control your mood? And this is I think this is a fascinating and crucial topic most people don't think about. Your mood, what you call mood, good mood, bad mood, whatever it is, your mood is determined 100% by neurotransmitters in your brain, by the amount of serotonin, by the amount of dopamine, sometimes other adrenaline, there are so many of these neurochemicals which affect how your brain works. How much control do you have over those chemicals? I mean, we try. I mean, caffeine works a little bit. Some people will take these antidepressants, which are often these SSRI, serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors, all these fancy language doctors like to use. It's meant to make more serotonin available in your brain. Serotonin is, presumably makes you feel better. Oxytocin is another feel-good neurotransmitter. But if you read the medical literature, I think, would this be correct? There's some doctors here. I think it would be medically correct to say that antidepressant drugs are this much better than a placebo. They're better than a placebo, but not much. So that's what it is. So if you don't have a good mood, the reason is not your life. The reason is the neurotransmitters in your brain. What can you do for that? Indirectly, you can change your lifestyle, and that may, over a period of time, lead to some changes in how your brain works. This is psychology. That's why talking therapy in psychology can address these problems which have organic roots. We're talking about organic problems of the brain. Talk therapy addresses organic problems of the brain because it's all connected. Our behavior affects our brains affect our behavior. Anyway, this is all science. The point here is that we are fixated on having a good mood in spite of the fact that we have no control over it. Does that sound like a formula for suffering? It's like someone who's fixated on having sunny days. If you live in New Jersey, 50-50. If you live in upstate New York or in UK, about 10% chance of having a sunny day. If you live in California, I used to live in California, about 75%, a little bit better. What control do you have? But here again, you can choose to move. So if you're living in upstate New York, move to California and you'll have more sunny days. You can do something indirectly like that. In the same way, you can change your daily behavior, which will have some effect over your mood. But the fact is, I long ago wrote an article called "The Tyranny of Neurotransmitters." We're the victim. We have no control. What is the solution? The solution is not better medications, because now somebody's going to say, well, Swamiji, what if they get a better antidepressant? So instead of being this much better than a placebo, maybe you'll be this much better. Well, there will be no feel-good drug, ever, at any point in time. That's not... The way our brains work is so complicated that you can't just manipulate your mood with some medication. So where's the solution? If you can't create a perfect lifestyle where everything is nice and happy, where you are guaranteed, let me make it more clear. Is it possible to have a lifestyle in which you never, ever experience a bad mood? Could you have such a life? Is there such a thing? There's no such thing. So changing your lifestyle will not give you a constantly good mood. Taking medications won't give you constantly good mood. Yet we are so fixated on having a good mood. What is the solution? Most of you can answer. The solution is found in the teachings of Vedanta, wherein we have this healthy detachment, where you can know that you are okay in spite of the bad mood. That's the solution. To discover that you're okay in spite of the bad mood. It's like getting used to, if you're living in upstate New York, get used to the clouds. Do clouds kill you? Are clouds so horrible? Not so horrible. Are bad moods so horrible? Look at that comparison. Clouds come and go. We have no control over it. Bad moods come and go. We have not much control over them. Let it be. This is a Vedantic solution. We call it a healthy detachment, a detachment that arises when you understand your true nature as unchanging consciousness that's utterly unaffected by all of that. Let's take just one more. By the way, I apologize. There are so many questions here we're not able to get to, and there's just no way. Just very brief questions, and we'll end our session. This is Jose, writing from Venezuela. We've mentioned several times, I've talked about a heavenly domain. And Jose, not being raised in the Hindu tradition, doesn't understand that Hindus believe in heaven and hell, like Christians believe in heaven and hell, like Jews and Muslims believe in heaven and hell. But Hindus always have their own spin. That is, not just one heaven and hell, but there's some texts will talk 7 heavens and 7 hells, and all different descriptions. So anyway, the theology of all these religions describe various heavens and hells. In Advaita Vedanta, we have a different definition entirely. We'll call heaven a lifetime of pure enjoyment, and hell a lifetime of pure suffering. In order to have a lifetime of pure enjoyment, you're not going to get it on this planet. And to have a lifetime of pure suffering, you're not going to find that on this planet. So, heavenly domains. There's another question related to that. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here. This is Shravya, who lives in Telangana, South India. Shravya asks, do heaven and hell actually exist? And this is the question I was looking for. Do heaven and hell actually exist? Well, we don't know. To be very honest, certain scriptures will refer to heaven and hell, but those scriptures are texts like Puranas and like our epics, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and they're not science books. So we know from a standpoint of science that this earthly realm absolutely exists. Can we use scientific techniques to prove or disprove the existence of a heavenly or hellish domain? Science won't help us out there at all. What's called heaven or hell, these so-called 7 heavens, 7 hells in the Hindu tradition, are things that cannot be observed. Also, no one has ever come back to tell us. Well, actually, I was looking on YouTube. There are people who claim to have come back. They have these, they're called near-death experiences. And they say, in my near-death experience, I went to heaven and this is what I saw. And they say, I went to hell and this is what I saw. And I've come back to tell you. I don't know how valid any of those experiences turn out to be. Anyway, that's what they think happened, and that's what they think, that's what they believe. Really speaking, we don't know. So let's conclude, though, with the Vedantic definition of heaven and hell. There are plenty of theological definitions. The Vedantic definition of heaven and hell, first of all, is a temporary state. Very interesting that the biblical religions consider heaven and hell to be eternal states, which leads to a huge theological problem. For your finite sins, you suffer for all eternity. Does that make any sense? For finite sins, you should suffer for eternity. There's a theological problem with this concept of heaven and hell being eternal. The ancient sages never made that mistake, so they understand that as a result of your finite papa karmas, sins, you undergo a finite life of pure suffering. That finite life of pure suffering is what we call hell. For your finite good deeds, you might gain a finite life of pure enjoyment. That's what we call heaven. But both of these lifetimes in heaven or hell would come to an end. And this is a unique feature of the Hindu tradition. Allow me to end with a joke. This is decades ago. I was traveling in those days in New Jersey, in this area, and we were talking about this very topic. And I said, maybe heaven is like going to Hawaii. And you go to Hawaii with $1,000, and that $1,000 gets expended in Hawaii. You enjoy all that tropical thing and the beaches and all of that. But when your $1,000 is exhausted, then you come back. And that becomes a metaphor for how, due to your accumulated good karmas, you enjoy a lifetime in heaven. When those accumulated good karmas are exhausted, you come back. So then I said, so I'm teaching this, by the way, to get the context. I'm in New Jersey teaching this to a local community of New Jerseyans, if that's a word. And I said, well, if going to heaven is a good metaphor, if going to Hawaii is a good metaphor for going to heaven, what would be a good metaphor for going to hell? And believe it or not, one of them said, going to New Jersey. I don't know what is so hellish about New Jersey. I've lived here now for many years, 20 years, and I don't find it so hellish. They call it Garden State after all. The problem, just for some of you who may not know, is when you fly into New Jersey's main airport, Newark, New Jersey, and you come out of that main airport, all you see are factories and refineries. That's all you see for the first half hour. and that looks hellish, especially at night. You see the smoke going up, illumined by orange lights. It looks like hell. Fortunately, the rest of the state is not exactly like that. Anyway, nice to have this satsang today. Again, if you have questions, you can email them to me at swamit@arshabodha.org. Save video, satsang question in the subject, and I'll do my best to answer them next time. Very good. See you next time. We'll end with our prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhagvavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. That's very nice.